Hello and warm greetings to everyone. Welcome to my talk. I am thrilled to be here today to share my unique point of view and to be a part of the Jupyter Core contributor track. I would like to begin by introducing myself. My name is Anna Ruvalcaba and my pronouns are she, her. I am a member of the Jupyter Steering Council. I'm also a member of the NumFocus Diversity and Scientific Computing Committee, and I've been a contributor to Project Jupyter since January of 2016. I've led various initiatives in our community, and the reason I specify in the title of my talk that not all contributions to Jupyter can be found on GitHub is that none of my work has involved writing code. My focus has been rather on working with core developers and project leadership on collaborative meetings, larger events and conferences, sustainability efforts, general operations, partnerships with industry and academia, human resources, and also the Cal Poly internship program. My work as the director of Project Jupyter at Cal Poly is funded by various organizations. The university, which celebrates a learn by doing teaching method, has served as a hub of activity and contributions for Project Jupyter for well over a decade. Our presence here was established by Jupyter co-founder Brian Granger. So what's my talk about, and why should you stay tuned for the rest of it? I'd like to begin with the idea that the future of Jupyter and our ability to be sustainable for many decades to come is just as dependent on strategic activities and efforts which are designed to attract and retain contributors as it is on smart decisions in our code base. Our success is fundamentally tied to pillars that support community strength, such as key partnerships with industry and academia, inclusion and diversity efforts, and community engagement, and so on. In today's talk, I'll be sharing my experience related to 3 different strategic programs, one of them being events, the other inclusion and diversity efforts, and then finally, I will highlight our Jupyter internship program at Cal Poly, which I help lead. Starting with events, the vast majority of Jupyter's work is accomplished online, asynchronously through remote collaboration. However, despite this, in-person events have long been recognized as an important tool. Before we had Jupyter Days, before we had Jupyter Community Workshops, and before we had JupyterCon, our contributors were taking advantage of their time at various community events and conferences to make important progress on our work. And since only a small fraction of our global community has had the opportunity to attend in-person events, I wanted to share a brief overview of the last 5 years or so. From 2015 to 2017, there was a series of local and regional events called Jupyter Days. These events were primarily funded through several generous and important grants for our community during that time. Various foundations supported us, including the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation, the Leona M. and Harry B. Helmsley Charitable Trust were incredible supporters, and they facilitated this event series. So over a 2-year period, 10 events were held. Those events were mostly in the US. And while they all sought to, or were designed to strengthen and engage the community, not all of the events had the same focus. Some of them were more geared towards new folks to our community, users and developers. So they were more teaching events. And then there were events designed to gather our core developers to sprint on specific features or specific areas of work. And then there was a third type of events, which were essentially mini conferences where users from different parts of the community would gather to highlight the different environments and ways in which they were using Jupyter. In 2017, Project Jupyter and our parent organization, NumFocus, entered into a partnership with O'Reilly Media to host our first ever global user conference. And in August 2017 and 2018, over 700 participants gathered in each of those years to enjoy tutorials, talks, keynotes, and also the opportunity to sprint with users and developers from all corners of, or most corners, I wouldn't say all corners, of the Jupyter ecosystem. There are still over 150 talks that are available from both of those conferences if you're interested in seeking them out on YouTube. The best way to find them is to go to the O'Reilly Media YouTube page, go to the playlist tab, and search for JupyterCon. You'll be able to find them there. In 2018, as one partnership was ending for our user conference, another one was beginning with Bloomberg for our local and regional events. Through a donation to NumFocus, Bloomberg initiated this event series. Later on, we had a subsequent donation from Amazon Web Services. Those are our two main sponsors for this event series, which built on the success of Jupyter Days. And we renamed it to Jupyter Community Workshops. We put out a public call for proposals and on both Twitter and on our blog, and asked for the steering council to be involved in reviewing the applications. The goal of those community workshops is to increase community engagement by bringing together small groups of community members and core contributors. Somewhere around the 1 to 2 dozen mark is what we're usually targeting. Those folks are to get together over a period of 2 to 4 days for high impact strategic work on focused topics related to the Jupyter core mission. One of the most effective ways that for people to learn about Jupyter is through their colleagues and friends. This event series provides community members access to funding and also the recognition for hosting events in their own communities. Event organizers have included individual Jupyter users and developers. There's also been industry partners who've hosted them. There's been academic leaders who've hosted them and scientific research facilities, just to name a few. There have been 3 rounds of funding awarded since 2018, with each round increasing in complexity and reach. The first was in 2018, the second was in 2019, and finally the third was in 2020. And spoiler alert, the 2020 cohort did not quite go as we had planned. In round 1, we funded 3 events. In 2018, there was 2 events in the US and 1 in Europe. In 2019, there were 7 events that were funded. There was 1 in the US, 5 in Europe, and 1 in South America. In round 3, we funded 9 events, and we had our biggest and most ambitious plans for this year. But unfortunately, in late March, as the global pandemic became our new reality, we were obligated to put on pause those plans that we had for all in-person events. And currently this program's at a crossroads, and we're being pushed to be innovative and to rethink what the future will look like in regards to in-person events. Events are an incredibly important engagement tool, and it is imperative that our community continue to connect and to learn from each other. One of the One of the hardest things about the pandemic is that it interrupts our ability not only to host events now, but to plan for hosting events in the future. There's an incredible amount of uncertainty surrounding when it is that we will be able to safely gather. And so because we don't have that timeline, we can't do things like sign event contracts or even announce event dates. As you know, this obviously affected JupyterCon. JupyterCon was originally planned to be an in-person event in late summer in Europe. But by early summer, the organizing committee decided to undertake a massive change in plans when they decided that instead of canceling the event, they would instead present a new format and concept for the community. And that's where JupyterCon Online was formed. JupyterCon Online required a massive pivot from a group of motivated and ambitious contributors. I really want to extend a heartfelt thank you to that entire group for making this year's event possible. And as you enjoy this year's event, know that 2021 is on the mind of Project Jupyter's leadership. Look for announcements on Twitter and on the blog in general for all news related to Jupyter. There's two main places that you should be looking for updates and current news. Our main page on Twitter, which is @ProjectJupyter, the main JupyterCon page on Twitter, which is @JupyterCon. You can use the hashtags hashtag JupyterCon 2020 and hashtag JupyterCon. And you can also visit our blog at blog.jupyter.org to get the latest news related to JupyterCon 2021. Another strategic initiative and example of non-code contributions in our community are efforts designed to improve inclusion and diversity. I won't be able to explore all aspects of this very important topic, but I do want to share some of the work that I've been involved in over the years as they relate to this topic. Before I do that, I do want to define inclusion and diversity. It's important for me to do that. Inclusion refers to behaviors and social norms that ensure people feel welcome, valued, and included, while diversity refers to traits, characteristics, or dimensions that make people unique. That could be things like gender, race, language spoken, country of origin, educational background, among many others. An inclusive environment sustains and encourages diversity to grow. It's not enough to simply place people of diverse backgrounds in the room. In order to truly succeed, we need to ensure that those people are given a voice once they get there. Inclusion goes beyond a simple tolerances of, let me start from the top. Inclusion goes beyond simple tolerance of differences to an environment where differences are valued, explored, and appreciated. One of my favorite quotes is from Vernee Myers, and she says that diversity is being invited to the party. Inclusion is being asked to dance. In order for diversity initiatives to succeed, inclusion must be cultivated and practiced. If we don't elevate inclusion, then a community could easily churn through new diverse individuals and also actively discourage others from joining. The result would be an environment that is neither inclusive or diverse. And this is why I choose to put inclusion before diversity in the label for these efforts. Many thanks to M. Pacer for introducing me to this concept and for helping me to form my thoughts on this topic. Over time, the world has become more and more reliant on open source tools. And This makes it even more important that the people who build and design them be as inclusive and diverse as the people who use them. Jupyter is one of the most recognized projects in our field. We have a responsibility and an opportunity to be leaders in efforts to improve inclusion and diversity in tech. Taking into account gender, which is just one dimension of diversity, two of the most recent surveys over the years in our community find that only somewhere between 4 and 10% of contributors are women or non-binary folks. For the sake of our community health, we must acknowledge this as a problem and work to solve it. At the end of the day, from a long-term strategic standpoint, inclusion is incredibly important to a team's ability to complete the mission of an organization. It's not just the right thing to do. People who feel included and valued will produce better results. A diverse and engaged community of users and contributors is a core part of the impact and value of Jupyter's work. Without community, our work lacks meaning. There's two efforts which I've contributed to at Jupyter and that we've undertaken in order to encourage and improve inclusion and diversity in our community. And while these efforts by no means address the entire scope of the deficit that we find ourselves in, it's important that the community rally around further efforts in order to amplify their impact. That's where the real impact can be made, when the community gets involved. The first thing that I'll highlight is our code of conduct. This code of conduct was formally established in 2016. It was a project that was championed by Jupyter Cal Poly intern Reese Netro, our Jupyter co-founder Fernando Perez, and myself. The code of conduct was also reviewed and supported by the entire Jupyter Steering Council. I briefly want to highlight what's included in the code of conduct and also encourage you to review these community guidelines in full. The code of conduct is a relatively short document organized into 3 sections that are designed to set the tone of interactions in the Jupyter community. The first is a guiding statement that highlights that we're fundamentally committed to fostering a productive, harassment-free environment for everyone. Our code of conduct applies equally to founders, developers, mentors, and new community members in all spaces managed by Project Jupyter, which includes IPython. This could be on our mailing lists, on our GitHub organizations, our chat rooms, events, whether they be online or in person, the discourse, community forum, and any other forums provided or created by the project team. The second part of the code of conduct is a list of 8 expected behaviors for our community members. The goal with that is not to provide an exhaustive list of things to do or things not to do, but rather for the reader to understand the spirit of those guidelines, which are intended to enrich and strengthen the community. This includes things like be considerate, be respectful, be careful in the words that you choose. The last 2 sections of the code of conduct include an overview of reporting and enforcement procedures. I encourage you to read the full code of conduct, as it is an important part of being a part of our community. On top of that, it's quite brief and it is digestible. So finally, if you want to share a code of conduct concern, or you have any questions about our code of conduct, there's 2 different resources or support mechanisms. There's a form on jupyter.org/conduct. And you can also email using conduct@jupyter.org. The second initiative that I want to highlight and that I'm I participate in related to inclusion and diversity efforts is a part of our wider community, and it's called the Diversity and Inclusion in Scientific Computing Committee, or DISC for short. I'll call it DISC from now on. This volunteer group is a part of Jupyter's parent organization, Focus. DISC is made up of a small group of contributors from various open source projects. Over the years, it has undertaken various initiatives. However, there's one specific one that I want to highlight, and that is the Discover Cookbook. Discover is an acronym for Diverse and Inclusive Spaces and Conferences, Overall Vision, and Essential Resources. In 2017, the committee organized and hosted an unconference style event. And from this event came the bulk of the content for this cookbook, which was published in 2018. It's a community resource available on GitHub, and its aims are to inspire those seeking to create an inclusive and diverse event experience by providing a variety of tactics that can be undertaken. The easiest way to find this guide is to look on the NumFocus website, or just simply Google Discover Cookbook NumFocus. The community is welcome to submit pull requests and issues to help improve this guide. I do want to acknowledge the guide is, however, focused on in-person events. And obviously this year and for the foreseeable future, we are mostly going to be doing online events. Online gatherings are not new, but the volume, the frequency, and the expectations surrounding online events is something that I think we're actively trying to figure out how to help guide the community with. And so we're working on the next iteration of the Discover Cookbook, specifically for online events. I do want to be clear in that it is a guide for how to be inclusive, how to encourage inclusion and diversity at online events, not a guide for how to organize an online event. This is a resource that we hope to have for the community in 2021. And you can subscribe to the NumFocus newsletter by going to their website or follow them on Twitter to hear the latest announcements related to our efforts there. The third and final non-code contribution to Jupyter that I want to highlight is a program hosted at California Polytechnic State University, or Cal Poly for short. We have recently wrapped up our 6th summer cohort of students since 2015. It's been a wonderful learning experience for me to serve first as a mentor to the students and now as the leader of the program. It's also important to note that that Jupyter's involvement with training students goes for much further back than 2015. Since 2006, undergraduate and graduate student interns have played a critical role in our community. We've trained over 40 students who have built and helped to build some amazing things, including IPython widgets, NB-Convert, Jupyter Lab, and various Jupyter Lab extensions, including Table of Contents, the Git extension, and Jupyter Lab status bar, for example. In fact, in addition to that, multiple current and former Jupyter Steering Council members started out contributing as students. I want to share a bit about the program, its structure, and encourage the wider community to be involved in training students. My focus, however, will be on, despite that our program goes back much further than 2015, my focus will be on describing the program since then. Some of the program basics and structure include the following parameters. The goal of each cohort of mostly undergraduate students is to build Jupyter Lab extensions with a focus on human-centered design and a user-driven development process. Teams of 3 are formed, pairing 2 software engineers with 1 UX UI designer. The students work part-time during the school year following the academic calendar. And then over the summer, they work for 11 weeks full-time, which is 40 hours a week. Our one key aspect of this program is that recruiting is intentional and focused on attracting a wide variety of diverse candidates. We participate in the school-wide career fair. We post flyers in different buildings on campus. We visit classrooms and student clubs and involve professors on campus. This allows us to attract students from a wide variety of majors, including math, physics, computer science, art and design, graphic communications, et cetera. And in addition, when we evaluate which candidates to interview, this program has gotten quite popular over the years, and there's many more candidates who apply than we can interview. As we are vetting those applications, we compare students using we compare them to only students at their grade level, and this allows us to interview and hire students all the way from first year to students in graduate or master's programs. Highlight for 2020, this cohort that just closed, we were able to hire 9 students. So 3 teams of 3. Those teams built 3 extensions. The first one is the Jupyter Tabular Data Editor, which provides an interface to edit data files side by side with Jupyter Notebooks. There's also the Jupyter Lab Code Snippets extension, which enables users to write code more rapidly by allowing them to create, save, and reuse code snippets. And then finally, the last extension that was built this summer by students is the Jupyter Lab Interactive Dashboard Editor, which is a live editor that enables users to effortlessly create beautiful dashboards. You can find all of those student projects on github.com/JupyterCalPoly. And I want to close with a little bit of a call to action for the community, and that we're looking for partners for this program to provide either mentorship and or funding. We're at a key inflection point in our ability to administer the program, and we are looking for additional involvement. Which brings me to my closing here. If you want to keep up to date with any of the initiatives that I've shared today, as I mentioned before, the best place to look for Jupyter news is about Twitter, is Twitter and our blog. You can follow Project Jupyter on Twitter using the handle @ProjectJupyter. You can also follow me directly on Twitter using my handle @RUV7. I mostly post about community news, events, scholarships, and other community building related efforts and topics. And I want to close on this. There is an immense amount of value in efforts to build and improve our community. Help amplify that. Be more involved. I would ask that you not only encourage and support existing efforts, but also to reach out and to think about what initiatives you can take on to improve connections, build new relationships, and take Jupyter into the next decade. Non-technical contributions are just as important as new features when it comes to ensuring the sustainability of Project Jupyter. As you navigate all of the things that 2020 may still bring you, I want to remind you to take care of yourself and to take care of each other.